He is the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. Narendra Modi's trip is described as historic. The two countries are expected to strengthen their military and economic ties. But what's behind this new close relations between Israel and India? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Jane Dutton. An old friend. That's how Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu is describing Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's on a visit to Israel, the first by a sitting Indian Prime Minister. His trip marks a significant warming of relations since Israel and India established full diplomatic ties 25 years ago. India has long promoted a pro-Arab agenda and downplayed ties with Israel in fear of alienating its large Muslim population and upsetting economic relations with Arab states. Although Modi will not visit Ramallah on this visit, he met Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas in New Delhi in May. But some say this trip represents a shift in policy. Modi's visit comes with a backdrop of an already booming business and military ties with Israel. India is one of the world's biggest importers of defense equipment, while Israel has become one of its largest suppliers. The two leaders are also looking at the huge economic potential in areas like water, agriculture, and space technology.
It is my singular honor to be the first ever Prime Minister of India to undertake this groundbreaking visit to Israel. I want to thank my friend, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for the invitation and for receiving me with so much warmth. My visit celebrates the strength of centuries-old links between our societies. Based on these bonds of our partnership has maintained a strong and sustained upswing since the establishment of full relationship, diplomatic relations 25 years ago.
Let's take a closer look at India's military spending. Israel's is its biggest foreign arms market, where it buys on average $1 billion worth of weapons and equipment every year. According to the Stockholm International Peace Institute, India bought 41% of Israel's arms exports between 2012 and last year. Already this year, Israeli companies have signed weapons deals with India, totaling more than $2.6 billion. State-owned Israel Aerospace Industries says it'll supply India with an advanced defense system of medium-range surface-to-air missiles, launchers, and communications technology. Israel also sells radars, drones, and other equipment to India. But their relationship has been complicated. India initially shunned ties with Israel, voicing support instead for Palestinian statehood. In 1947, India voted against the UN partitioning of Palestine that divided the territory into Arab and Jewish states at the end of the British Mandate. 2 years later, India voted against Israel's admission into the United Nations. It was only in 1950 that New Delhi recognized Israel as a nation. But it would take decades before India established diplomatic ties in 1992 after the end of the Soviet Union and began its military cooperation. Prime Minister Modi's visit now appears to signal a shift in Indian policy to the region. Let's bring in our guests. In Tel Aviv, Akiva Eldar, a political columnist with Al Monitor. And in London, Kadira Pethiyagoda, visiting fellow with the Brookings Doha Centre, who specialises in Indian foreign policy in Asia and the Middle East. Welcome to both of you. Akiva Eldar, this has been a long time coming, hasn't it? Why now?
to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the establishment of full diplomatic relations between Israel and India. And this is a good reason to celebrate and to welcome for the first time the Indian Prime Minister, and also maybe to sign some extra, as you mentioned before, some extra unprecedented deals, arms deals between Israel and India. This is always this good time to sell arms, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, how do you feel about it, Kadira Pithi Yagoda? Is it to celebrate the 25 years of relationship, or is it all about arms and the sort of money that we're already seeing exchanging hands?
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit of both. So the difference, I'd say, between Modi's government and the previous Congress government is that while both of them bought arms from Israel, the BJP and Modi are more overt about it. And so this is really about bringing the relationship out of the closet. In terms of actual policy, I think the main drivers for the visit are security interests, all the arms deals that you were discussing, but also things like the United States relationship, which India prioritizes as well, and Washington prefers Israel, which is diversifying its strategic relationships, to do so with partners like India, which it doesn't see as a threat. You've also got economic interests driving the relationship, as well as domestic politics. So the BJP and the Hindutva movement from which Modi arose has long seen Israel as a natural ally.
So it's not a tenuous relationship. I mean, for example, if Congress were to come into power again, do you think that this is likely to change? Will it be dealt with in a relationship personal basis, or will it be state by state?
I think personally, definitely there's some rapport between Netanyahu and Modi. They're both very nationalistic. They both see their two countries as representing great civilizations, ancient civilizations that have suffered persecution over history, and they see themselves as on the verge of a course correction. I think that if there is another Congress government in the future, the sort of the structure of the relationship won't change too much. The arms deals will still continue, but I think overtly in terms of a lot of the fanfare, it would be much less than it is under the BJP.
Akiva, I should imagine that Israel is seeing this as a long-term relationship, long-term sustainable deals, because there's been a long relationship, particularly between the BJP and the Israeli leadership, hasn't there?
Yeah, but first of all, we have to remind the audience what actually happened 25 years ago that brought about this revolutionary change in the relationship. And this was the Madrid conference that took place in October 91. And since then, India's relationship with Israel were very chilly. India was the leader of the non-alignment countries and supported openly the Palestinian struggle for independence. And the Madrid conference and later on the Oslo Agreement allowed the Indian, because we are not just talking about parties. India is the largest democracy in the world, and the people have a say. And the Israeli willingness, it looked like it was a genuine willingness to negotiate with the Palestinian. Actually, Netanyahu led the Israeli, as deputy foreign minister, the Israeli delegation to Madrid that met for the first time with the Palestinian, the Syrian, and other Arab countries. And this paved the way to the establishment of relationship with China, to upgrade the relationship with Japan. Now, Netanyahu, of course, takes it for granted, and he doesn't see, of course, any linkage between the relations. It's completely because they love Israel. The other thing is very timely for Netanyahu. When Germany, for instance, just a week ago, has compared the Israeli treatment, the government's treatment of human rights NGO as the Chinese and the Russian treatment of those organizations. And now he can show that still Israel has very good, open relationship. He traveled to China. And you know what? The next guest in Jerusalem, guess who is going to be our next guest the end of this week? The president of Rwanda. Netanyahu just visited Africa. So it's not all about those Europeans and the Americans. And of course, as was mentioned before, we have a common friend in the White House. Both the Israeli and the Indian leaders are great fans of the new American leader. So they can compare
it
notes
really is, excuse me, jumping in here, it really is about
their
diversifying
celebrations.
for Israel, isn't it? From a cultural point of view, from an economic point of view, and from a geopolitical point of view, from Africa to regions in the Middle East.
Yes, definitely, and Asia as well. I think that Israel sees that it can't rely on the United States as its main strategic backer forever. There are trends within, long-term trends within US politics that show signs of a public that's wary of US foreign interventions. And most of those interventions, when it comes to the Middle East, have favoured Israel. So I think Israel sees that it needs to build ties with some of the rising powers, India, China, and also the reassertive Russia. And in this context, the United States, which obviously still has a major influence on Israel, I think would prefer it expand its ties with countries like India rather than with China. And you've seen incidents where military technology transfers between Israel and China were vetoed by the United States. So I think
I was going to ask you about that. So, I mean, the fact that Israel can't
Yeah.
actually sell to China certainly plays into India's hands here, because from a spending power point of view, China has the upper hand.
Yes, China definitely has the upper hand, but I guess India is also more in need. As you mentioned, India is one of the biggest arms importers, and its own arms industry is quite underdeveloped when it comes to China. So Israel sees India as a great potential market for its exports.
Akiva, we're going to talk about India and China a little bit more, but let's take it to Pakistan now and how Pakistan will view this arming up, this gaining incredible weapons from Israel and the military force that it'll add to India. How concerned do you think Pakistan will be about this?
Of course, they will be concerned, as well as the parties in India itself that are following this visit and a warm relationship that are developing between Netanyahu, the personal relationship, and Modi. I believe that Pakistan will send a clear message to Israel that we expect you to be more careful when you supply lethal arms, and if the Pakistani will realize, the Pakistani government, that these weapons have been used against them, Israel may pay the price, and not only Israel, but Jewish communities all over the world. Pakistan has a very long arm, and I think this is another indication that the Israeli government is so desperate.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, do you think the Israeli government is being a little bit stupid here when it comes to greed? I mean, is that the factor? Selling these arms at any cost?
Yeah, and I think that selling arms to countries that are not particularly democratic and concerned about human rights, these weapons are used. And you know that the Israeli border police has been training their counterparts in India to deal with demonstrators and so on. And I think that maybe even the Indian public opinion is not very keen about this kind of relationship that is based on arms race between India and Pakistan, and Israel contributing to it.
Yeah, because it certainly could lead that. Sorry, I'm going to bring in Kadira here. Could this lead to an arms race between India and Pakistan? I mean, we know that Pakistan is a nuclear country, as is India, but will they try and compete with India here? And I mean, the relations between the two are particularly fractious at the moment.
Yes, I think that they'll be looking closely at the deals that are being undertaken and whatever's available publicly, and they'll see how those so say for example India buys a particular type of air missile defense system, Pakistan will look at the types of weapons it needs to procure in order to respond to that, and so the planners in Pakistan will be monitoring these deals very closely. But of course the visit is only a sort of a symbolic gesture, and these deals have been going on up until this time. So Pakistan would have been aware of these all along, and it would be seeing where it can sort of compete with India to gain its own strategic advantage, where perhaps it can pressure India a bit more, maybe through further deals with China, and so forth.
So this relationship could come at the cost of Pakistan, though it's not good at the moment. What about the Palestinians? I mean, we touched on it a little briefly at the beginning, but I mean, have they been pushed to the side now? I mean, is the relationship between India and the Palestinians over now, a thing of the past?
Yeah, I think that the relationship with the Palestinians, there's a long history there. You know, India is symbolized as a leader in the third world in terms of its anti-colonial struggle, and alongside that ideology, it's supported the Palestinian cause right from the start. And so you had leaders like Gandhi saying that Palestine belongs to the Arabs just like England belongs to the English. And you've had Nehru supporting that as well. And it's only in the recent decades where you've seen a change in that. And that's in line, I guess, with India post-Cold War, taking a more transactional or more strategic approach to foreign policy and a less ideological one. But I think that India will still try to be a friend to all, as it does in most of the conflicts in the Middle East. So it tries to maintain relationships with Saudi Arabia, in Iran, with Israel and other Arab states.
Okay, let me ask Kiva about this, if I may. So India's going to trade a line here, try to be friends with everybody, but it's quite a statement going to Israel and not going to Ramallah. I mean, what do you think was behind this shift? Was working with the Palestinians not good for business, or is it because of Modi's relationship with Muslims?
It's, I believe, because there is a zero-sum game now between Ramallah and Jerusalem, or Jerusalem and Ramallah. And Modi wanted to be 100%, not 99% pro-Netanyahu and pro-Israel. And you remember, even President Trump made this effort to meet with Abu Mazen and to go to Ramallah. So probably Modi is not even trying to posture kind of neutrality. Actually, when I'm thinking about it now, he could serve as a go-between between the Israelis, because he's got, you know, such a huge Muslim population, and because he is respected in Israel, I think that he could offer good services and to go to Ramallah and then go back to Jerusalem. And since the Palestinians don't really put much hope in Trump, and the Israelis don't put too much hope in Europe, here maybe Asia can play a role. After all, India is a superpower. You mentioned that Pakistan and India have something in common when it comes to nuclear power, but Israel and India have something in common, that they are both, according, of course, to foreign sources, when I speak as an Israeli, Israel is also a member of this club, which is not a real full membership, but as we say, Israel, they can also compare notes when it comes to the nuclear power.
Do you think that that's not happening because of the diaspora in both countries and the fact that the Indian Israelis, you know, who are living there are leaning further to the right in the country? Does that help Netanyahu entrench his policies and the fact that he doesn't need to shift?
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, you're absolutely correct. If Modi as a very smart, experienced politician, very successful politician, if he was convinced that going to Ramallah and shaking hands with Abu Mazen can contribute to his popularity, that people are going to like it home, I'm sure that he would make the extra mile. Actually, it's not more than a few miles from Jerusalem to Ramallah, and I'm sure that Netanyahu would have provided him a helicopter and let him take it home with him. I believe that in terms of real politics, Modi believes that the Palestinians, good relationship with Palestinians, is not an asset. Maybe it's even a nuisance.
Kadira, what about good relations with China? Is that what's driving all of this? And do you think the fear of China and the New Road project through the Himalayas by China is impacting on India and the way it behaves from a military point of view and a foreign policy point of view?
I'd definitely say India's overarching foreign policy is impacted by China and the Belt and Road Initiative. India sees China as arguably its greatest foreign threat. India's nuclear program was, you could say, more designed to defend against China than against Pakistan. And I think that China's increasingly strong relationship with countries all along its trade routes through the Belt and Road Initiative from Asia to the Middle East is concern for India. And I think that its dealings with Israel and its arms deals with Israel are quite related to that as well. But as I said, China is also building its ties with Israel, and I think that the Israelis are very shrewd, and they would see that they need to maintain their ties with China and not antagonize China either in terms of building their relationships with India. But just if I can just go back to some of the domestic politics that you mentioned with regard to the Palestinians. I think that it's also important to note that Modi's visit was hyped up last year, and then it was delayed a bit. And it actually happened after these significant elections that occurred in India, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, for example, where the BJP needed the Muslim vote in order to win. So I think that Modi is still mindful of some of the not necessarily in order to win, but definitely helped it along. So I think Modi is quite mindful of the domestic politics and the Indian Muslims and how they view
Okay, let me bring
Akiva
Akiva quickly because we're running out of time. I mean, his role in those riots, I mean, has it stained his relationship with countries like Israel? I mean, it appears that it hasn't, but are there conversations behind closed doors in order for this sort of behavior not to happen again?
Yeah, I think that this is an opportunity for Netanyahu and Modi to make sure that they have an open line. For Netanyahu, it's very important to show that his policy towards the Palestinian is not causing the isolation of Israel. So he needs Modi. Modi needs him, because there is still this myth that Israel can open the gate to the White House. So Modi believes that Netanyahu and, of course, the Jewish community can serve an important role to show also that India has close relationship with Washington through Jerusalem. And the way to Washington, sometimes you have to buy first a ticket to Jerusalem.
So it's a big trip indeed. Akiva, Eldar and Kadira Pithiyagoda, thank you very much. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. Mine is @Jane Dutton. For me and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.